What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, we're doing the game week preview, of course, for game week 8. We're going to talk through a bunch of topics, including Man City attackers, all the injuries and flags that are going on at the moment, plus a bunch of your questions answered as well. So if you enjoy it, give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you're new around here, and let's talk about Fantasy Football Scout. So if you haven't already checked out Fantasy Football Scout, I'd highly recommend that you do so. There is a link in the description below if you want to sign up and become a member. You can do it month to month if you just want to use it for a few months just to see what it's like, or you can sign up for a whole year, and obviously that will take you through to part of next season as well if you sign up right now. Like I said, link in the description below. Now, I've talked about the fact there's a lot of tools over it, and I've never got enough time to go through all of them. So you got like all the stats from all the matches, all the player stats, team stats, you got season ticker, you got transfer planners, you got rate my team tool, player projections, and all this stuff as well. One thing that I've said quite a lot that I really like is the stats table. So you can create your own table. Now, I'm not going to go through exactly how to do that. You can figure that out. But obviously, you just go through create a table, you put in the name, description, and then you can choose a bunch of stats that you want to include. So I've already got some that I've already made that I use. So the main one that I use is not the video one. That was for a previous video. But it's the attackers one. So in this one, I've put every single player in the game. Now, you can filter that down to midfielders, to defenders, or attackers, however you want. But I've got it all attackers. So if I want to look at kind of a defender versus a midfielder versus a forward, or I want to compare a bunch of players from the same team, then I can do that in here. And you can do it for all matches. You can change it down to like the last 2 game weeks, the last 4, the last 6. I mean, personally, I like quite a big sample size, or as big as possible. So I tend to look at the moment at all matches. But you can even compare to kind of previous seasons as well to see how a player maybe has improved or got worse or whatever it might be. And then you can just start highlighting them. So if you want to just check Salah, Mane, Vardy, let's just say you want to do all the big hitters, Ronaldo and Lukaku, you can just show those players and then you can see all the stats for them as well. And again, if you don't want to see headed goal attempts or you don't want to see shots in the box, you can go back and modify your tables in this section here. So I can just modify it. You can come down here, you can just tick or untick all the boxes for all the stats you want to see. And as you can see, there is a lot of stats to look into. So if you haven't checked it out, that is just one of the tools. There's a bunch of other ones over there. I'd highly recommend using it. I've used Fantasy Football Scout for over 10 years now. So if you want to try it out, link in the description below. Get signed up now. So I got asked questions about player fitness quite a lot. Could I talk about it, right? So one of the tweets was about updates on Rudiger and Lukaku fitness. So I just added in a bit about Rafinha and Trent because I got loads of questions about them as well. What I'll just quickly say before we talk about specific players is, on international breaks, right, if you've not played FPL before, you are always going to get flags because players somehow pick up minor injuries and they either don't travel or they start missing games and they come back early and then miraculously they're fine by the weekend. So realistically, you want to try and not stress about it too much and just wait for the press conferences before the weekend. And I appreciate sometimes press conferences aren't very useful. It'll be like, yeah, there's some knocks, there's some niggles, and they don't tell you who it's for. But for most of these players, especially when they're big players, they're going to get specifically asked by journalists, and so we should at least get an answer. And just to give you some great news today, something to make you really happy, there's another international break in 23 days, and you're going to go through all of this stuff again, right? So just be prepared for it. But in terms of specific players, so this is about Rafinha. So he hasn't got an injury, he's not flagged yet, but he might miss the game, right? So Joe is a journalist, like a local journalist, I think it's for Leeds Live, and he was talking about how Rafinha, so I think he's come off the bench twice for Brazil, but he's also played really well, right? Because he's a really good player. And now he's going to start the last game. So it's going to kick off at UK time, 1:30. Brazil are going to kick off. And then the game is just over 24 hours later at Southampton as well. Obviously, Leeds are away. So it's a bit of a pain, probably, and I think there is probably a chance now that Rafinha is not going to start that game. Now, I don't know that for sure. I'm just guessing. Again, we will hear what Bielsa says. He will get asked about this. Rafinha is one of Leeds' most important players. Joe then goes on to say that there might be issues with connecting flights. I would assume that these players are going to get private jets or whatever, but we don't know that yet either. So from the time the game kicks off, for 25 and a half hours later, there's kickoff for the Southampton game. So the chances are Rafinha is probably not going to start. Now, what does that mean? I don't think it means you should transfer him out. And I also think if you're on a wild card, you should probably have him in anyway because you're going to want him going forward. But you need to keep your bench in check, right? You need to have a decent bench or at least someone that can come on. That decent bench doesn't mean you have to spend 6 or 7 million on that spot, but they need to be someone that's playing. If you've got a wild card, you've really got no excuses to put players players on the bench that just aren't going to play at all. So you need to fix that. What I would say with stuff like this is we're probably not going to find out till late, like on Friday, obviously, once the press conference happens. So make sure you've got a plan. You don't need to worry about it right now. Just have a couple of plans in place. If Rafinha's out, I do this. If he's fit, I do this, right? So that's Rafinha. With Trent, he's supposedly fit for game week 8. So this is from FPL Physio on Twitter, from the Telegraph newspaper. So Klopp talks about the Brazilian players, and then it goes on to say, on the plus side for Klopp, Trent Alexander-Arnold has recovered from a recent groin issue and will be available at Vicarage Road. Now, obviously, if you've got Trent, I'd be very happy right now because a lot of us have got rid of him or just don't own him, and obviously Watford away is a pretty decent game for him. But there isn't a guarantee that he starts, right? We should say that. Just because he's back from a groin injury doesn't mean he gets thrown straight in. How well has he recovered from it? Is he good to go for kind of 60, 70, 80, 90 minutes? We don't know that yet. Obviously, Klopp will say in the press conference. The one thing to say as well, Liverpool is the early kickoff on Saturday. So they kick off at 12:30 against Watford away. There isn't a game before that. So the deadline is on Saturday. So there's a very good chance we'll get the Liverpool team leaked. Like, Liverpool are just one of those teams that the lineup seems to always come out early. So we might find out on Saturday morning. I appreciate not everyone can just hang around waiting for that news on Saturday morning. It could come very late before the deadline as well. But that is worth noting. So Trent is back. I would expect him to play, of course, if he's fully recovered. But we'll have to wait and see what Klopp said. I mean, a lot of this is going to be waiting to see what they said in the press conferences, right? That's all we can go with. With Rudiger, so he missed the game against North Macedonia. This tweet was from the 11th, I think it's the 13th today. Due to back problems, the Chelsea centre-half had sat out his national side's final training session as a precautionary measure. And to be honest, Lukaku's the same. Lukaku's got muscle fatigue and has left the national team camp. I would say these are just both precautions, and I own them both, and I suspect they'll both play, so I'm not really worried about them. I'd be more worried about Trent and Rafinha than I am about Rudiger and Lukaku, and Rudiger and Lukaku are the two that are flagged, so that's just how crazy the international break is. So unfortunately, the updates are we are still going to have to wait, but Rafinha in particular, it now looks unlikely that he'll be able to play. I think Rudiger and Lukaku will be fine, and Trent, let's see what Klopp says, but it's looking good for him, especially if you kept him. So I had loads and loads and loads of questions about which Man City attacker to get, which Man City player is nailed right. I mean, we've talked about defence quite a lot, so I'm not going to go into that. I think it's the same thing. Diaz is nailed, Cancelo's the next best, and after that, just take your pick from kind of Walker or Laporte. I'd probably go Laporte like I have, but when it comes to attack, it's a little bit different. Now, few things, right? Number one, Man City attack is really good, best in the league. They will score, they should, at least, they'd be predicted to score quite a few goals over the next 3. So if you can get the right attacker, then yes, they will get you lots of points. But the big thing is, right, and it's pretty big, none of these players are nailed, and stop kidding yourself that they are. Like, for me, I think De Bruyne is about as nailed as it gets, right? In my opinion, he's going to start pretty much most of the Premier League games until maybe they get later on into the season and Champions League gets into the latter stages. But none of the other players are nailed on. I think we just have to accept that, right? I think looking for a nailed player, like, they're nailed right up until the point they're not. You can say, like, a lot of people right now, they'll be telling you that Foden is the most nailed, and perhaps he is. Maybe he's the most important. He can play on the right wing, left wing. He can play as a number 8. I'm sure Pep could get him playing as a number 9 as well. So possibly he is nailed. But for how long? Does that nailedness last for Burnley, for Brighton, for Palace? He's just played for England as well. Grealish came off early. Foden didn't. Does that mean Foden's less nailed than Grealish? We just don't know. And also, if you look at the fixture run, they've got Burnley. We all know they're going to beat Burnley. We're all expecting 4 or 5 goals. So if that's the case, do they need to play their first 11, or can they swap some of them or rotate some of them out and leave them for the away game in the Champions League instead? Obviously, the Champions League is still so big to Man City as well. They didn't win it last year against Chelsea, so will they play in that game? Then it's another away game against Brighton, which is more difficult than Burnley. Then they've got the EFL Cup where maybe they can rest some players. Then it's Palace at home, which again is a bit easier. So can anyone really sit here and tell me that Phil Foden is definitely playing against Burnley, he's definitely playing against Brighton, and he's definitely playing against Palace? Like, is he going to miss the Champions League game if he's that important to Man City? Like, he could play all of them. He could play all 5 or 6 of the next 6. But the chances are he doesn't because he's not nailed. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't buy a Man City attacker. And if I was buying one this week, I probably would go with Foden. But you cannot buy him and then be annoyed when he doesn't play. This is Man City. This is what happens. And I think people kid themselves that they know players are nailed. Like, a lot of people now are thinking maybe Grealish, possibly, is going to miss the next game. He's played a lot of games. Other players are back from injury now. Will he miss out? It's just difficult to know. There was some stuff on the Athletic podcast. I think it was, I don't know if it was Sam Lee speaking or he was speaking to someone else and someone else replied, but it was like, Foden, it's hard to drop him right now. Jesus, it's hard to drop him. So that's left wing and right wing. Does Grealish come into the centre? Does Grealish miss out? Who plays number 9? There's rumours that Sterling's had like a heart-to-heart or a talk with Pep and he wants to try and win his place and he's determined to kind of do that, even if it means playing through the middle. So is Sterling going to play 9? And if so, where the hell does Torres fit in? Is Torres going to come in for Burnley? And if he comes in for Burnley, what happens for the next few games? And I just can't help you. People want me to say who's nailed for the next 3 games. Nobody is the answer. So if you wanted me to kind of drill it down to who would I buy, like if we had some kind of inclination that Torres was going to start, I'd probably go for him because his numbers are ridiculous. He's going to play number 9 and that's probably pretty good against Burnley. And then you'd hope to get Palace as well. And again, if we go back to the fixtures, maybe that's how it'll work. Maybe Torres will get Burnley. They'll bench him for Champions League and then they'll play him against Brighton, bench him for the FA Cup and play him against Palace. Maybe he will play all 3. But in my opinion, nobody can tell you that for sure. So if I was buying one this week, it would probably be Foden, mostly because I think De Bruyne is just too much money right now for the way a lot of people's teams are set up. Obviously, if you're happy to get rid of Salah or Lukaku, or you've got 3 premiums, you could go for De Bruyne. I think he is the most nailed on attacker. And I think Jesus just takes up quite an important forward spot, so I just wouldn't want to get him either right now, which is why I'd go for Foden, because I just think Grealish has played a lot of games, and some people will look at that, right, well, he's absolutely nailed, and then people like me will look at it, right, is he due a rest? Maybe he is. So Foden's probably the one I'd go for, and they will score plenty of goals, and if you get the right one, you're in dreamland, but let's not pretend they're nailed. They're not. So I suspect if you wildcarded last week, you're probably in a very similar position to this, where you've got 2 Chelsea, 2 Man City defenders. Trent might be back fit, and in this scenario, we're just going to assume that he is fit and ready to play for Game Week 8, right? Because obviously if he isn't, then you just don't get him. It's as simple as that. But in this scenario, we'll say that he is going to play. We've got the team sheet. We know he's on it. Do we get him in? And there'll be people that don't have 2 Chelsea and 2 Man City, but they still got rid of him, right? So very similar situation. So I'm actually in this situation myself. I'm going to do my team selection video tomorrow, but I'll just talk about Trent now. So especially if you've got 2 Chelsea, 2 Man City, they do have good fixtures, right? Yes, Watford away for Trent is probably better than Brentford away for Azpilicueta or Rudiger, because obviously, and let's not kid ourselves about this, Trent is brilliant, right? He is the best defender in the game. He's nailed on. You're not worried about minutes concerns and stuff like that, unless he's injured, of course. And obviously, he's the most attacking as well. So Trent is brilliant. Let's not pretend otherwise. But the thing is, if you can get away with, let's just say Trent gets a clean sheet in Game Week 8. Somehow he doesn't get an attacking return against Watford, which I would say is probably quite unlikely. Then you've got all these 3 players again for the week after, or your 2 Chelsea, 2 Man City, whichever ones you went for. Man City have got Brighton away in the same week that Trent plays Man United away. And obviously Chelsea have Norwich at home. And then they have Newcastle away and Burnley at home. And in that same time, Man City have got Palace at home. Obviously this fixture is a little bit more difficult, Man United away. But overall, both teams have got good fixtures, right? That's why a lot of people went for them. So whether or not you have to get Trent straight back, I am still having this doubt in my mind as well. So obviously, Salah's got the same fixtures as Trent. So Man United away is fairly difficult. I don't think... The problem is, if you don't go for him, it's not like it's Game Week 8 or Game Week 15. There's plenty of opportunities where you can get back on the kind of Trent train. So Game Week 10 would be really good as well. Brighton at home looks very good for a clean sheet against Liverpool. I think Brighton are decent. For Liverpool. I think Brighton are decent, but they're not the best attack. They've got a pretty decent defence, but I don't think they're going to trouble Liverpool all that much. So Brighton at home could be pretty decent. West Ham away and Arsenal at home, maybe not so much. What I would say to people is, you don't want to... If you don't get him this week, what's the plan after that? And that's the thing I need to really think about. Because if I talk myself out of getting him here, am I also going to talk myself out of getting him here as well? Which could then be a problem, because then you start making... You fall into a trap where you're like, well, Trent's not actually as good as we all say, and, I can just wait till Game Week 13. And maybe we can, but this is a lot... Let's say he's fit for this whole period. This is a long time to go without the best defender in the game, especially when most of us have left money aside to buy him, right? And you're not going to want to use that money elsewhere, because then you're going to be priced out of Trent. You're going to have to start taking hits to get him in. You don't really want to do that, because right now it all looks cozy, right? The teams look great. Everyone's got good fixtures. You've got good squad depth. But as soon as you start wanting to make other moves, or there's other bench issues, then suddenly you're taking hits to get Trent. You've missed maybe a clean sheet and an attacking return against Watford. So I can't really give an answer yes or no, because I'm kind of in the same position. But I don't think there's anything wrong with bringing him back for this week. Who to bring him back for, especially if you've got double Chelsea, double Man City, is a little bit more difficult. Obviously, if Rudiger was ruled out, that would make it a bit easier. But for a lot of you've probably got benching headaches this week already. So I think you can get away with it for this week, right? Because Alisson and Fabinho are out as well because they're not going to get back from Brazil in time. So you could, for that, I guess give yourself an excuse not to do it. But the chances are Liverpool will still get a clean sheet, and Trent is extremely attacking, so he could still get returns here. Man United away, though, I think gives you a little bit of a cushion, but game week 10 is probably where you want to get him back. If you don't go for that game, you might be waiting until game week 13, and then I feel like it's a little bit of a risk because he's just so good, better than any of the Chelsea or any of the Man City players. I know Man City got the fixtures, but even with Cancelo, you can't be completely sure that he's going to start every single week, whereas with Trent, you can. So I think you can possibly get away with it this week, but then you're still going to want him from game week 10 onwards anyway, so it might just be best just to do it now if you've got the spare transfer. So this question's about Chelsea defenders. Who's the most preferred Chelsea defender? And then it goes on to say to get the most minutes and some attacking returns, right? So you want the best of both worlds, which is difficult. I feel like this is almost like the Man City attacker question. You just can't have it both ways. You either go for the minutes or you go for the attacking returns, because the two most nailed on defenders, I think we can all kind of agree by now, are Rudiger and Azpilicueta. Probably Rudiger is maybe the most nailed. I don't know, they haven't really got too many players that can play left centre-back. I mean, I don't know, like, I'm not a football manager or a football player. Maybe it's really difficult. Maybe Christensen and whoever can't go and play on that left centre-back spot. But either way, Rudiger looks pretty nailed, so does Azpilicueta, right? The problem is their attacking potential is quite low. I know Rudiger got a goal recently, but his attacking threat is not that high. And Azpilicueta, if Reece James was out for a bit longer, I would definitely say him, because he's more likely to play right wing-back. He's more likely to get returns, like we saw in the last game where he got 2 assists, almost got a goal. Obviously, if he got the goal, it would have taken away one of the assists, but still, he got 2 attacking returns. But if Reece James is back fit now, you'd expect Azpilicueta to play right centre-back a little bit more than being out on the right wing-back spot, right? And we've seen already that Thiago Silva's played centre, like in the centre, and then Christensen's played right centre-back, so it is a little bit of a headache. But right now, I'd say Rudiger and Azpilicueta are the most nailed on. The problem is you want attacking returns, you want the wing-back, so you want Reece James, or you want Chilwell, you want Alonso. And I spoke about Alonso yesterday, how everyone's now getting rid of him, and some people are going to Chilwell. I don't think it's a case that Chilwell is now so nailed on that he's not going to miss games, because I think he will. Alonso's probably going to get some minutes along the way as well. So for me, if you want to go outside of Rudiger or Azpilicueta, or you only want to go with one of them because you want to get a more attacking player, then I'd probably say Reece James. The problem is, if he gets benched, there is a chance that he comes on, because it could be that Hudson-Odoi is playing right wing back, possibly, and then he comes off at like the 60th, 70th minute, and Reece James gets put on, and suddenly you've got a cameo appearance. Now, obviously, he could get an attacking return, but he's a defender. He is a wing-back, right? Let's not pretend that he's going to get attacking returns every single game. So there is some risk there. And I think if you go for Chilwell, you've got a similar risk that he could miss games and Alonso can come in. So I don't think you can get the best of both worlds. I've got Azpilicueta and Rudiger, and I'm quite happy with that. If I was picking again this week and Reece James was fit, I probably would go for Rudiger and Reece James, just save a little bit of money. You get one nailed on defender, you get one that's a little bit more risky, but you have to have the bench for that, and you have to be prepared that they could come on for a cameo and just get 1 or 2 points. So if you want safety of minutes, which there's nothing wrong with at all, by the way, because they will get plenty of clean sheets as the season goes on, Rudiger and Azpilicueta. If you want a little bit more risk, I'd probably go Rudiger and James. I'm just not sure about the Chilwell Alonso side now. I just think the rotation threat for both is just too much for me. Okay, this question's about hits, right? I feel like we get hits questions most weeks, but should I be afraid to take hits to keep up with people who are playing their wild card, right? For me, it's the wrong way to look at it. You shouldn't be worried about people playing their wild card at all, because I always say this, right? It looks like people with wild cards have got the perfect team. If they've used it now, it means, like I've used it last week, you've now got to manage the rest of the season or up until the second wild card without it, right? And just the same as someone who isn't wildcard, and they've been managing up to this point, and hopefully have got some kind of a plan, or had some kind of a plan to get to Chelsea players or to get to Man City players, whatever it might be. But as always, the hit is going to depend on the individual status of what the transfer is and what your team is looking like. I would I don't think you should be using hits every week. I don't think there's any need to do that. A lot of the time, you know, the player has to outscore the player you're taking out by 4 points. If there's an injury or something, or you're using it as a way to get a captaincy option, or you're using it as a way to restructure your squad and get a captain in at the same time, then it might be worth it. But if you're just taking hits because people are getting Man City defenders in, or Man City attackers, or Chelsea defenders, chances are the players you're taking out are not worth taking out for a hit. So it's not about keeping up with people that have got their wildcards. Because people are always going to play. I know there's a lot of wildcards last week and this week, right? I get that. But there's always going to be other wildcards out there. You're not always going to be able to have the perfect plan. You need to just look at your team and decide where the priority transfers are. And like I've said before, like if you've got Ronaldo, it's not a priority to get Lukaku this week. It might be in game week 9, but it's not this week, right? Same with kind of Man United defenders. Okay, Luke Shaw, right? Super frustrating if you've had him. And look, there is a chance they concede against Jamie Vardy and co against Leicester. But if it's like for a hit to go to a Man City defender or a Chelsea defender, it's probably not worth it, right? And I think you can say that for most players. You just need a plan of when you're going to do it later on. So stop worrying about people playing a wild card. Just concentrate on your team. Do you need the hit? Like actually need it? If you do, then use it. Otherwise, just roll with it. It'll probably be better than you're probably picturing right now. Timo Werner apparently is back on the menu. People are looking at getting him in. What do I think of it? I'm not really sure where this has come from, to be completely honest. Like he is a good price, right? He's 8.6 million, so he's the same price as Jesus. But again, and I feel like this is the theme of this video, is he nailed on now? Like, I'm not a Chelsea fan, right? So Chelsea fans, if you think he's now nailed on, let me know in the comments below. But I still think, right, if Lukaku's fit, he's absolutely nailed through the middle. Mason Mount is probably not going to miss out too many times. That doesn't leave much of a gap for Werner or for Havertz or for any other of the other players that can play wide. And obviously they have got a possible good thing going here. Lukaku can hold the ball up. Werner can run in behind when he doesn't get offside or anything like that. And we know that he gets into good positions. Like I'm looking at his numbers for this year. 0.7 expected goal involvement. Obviously that's on a very small sample size. But it's not far off the 0.62 from last year. This is a guy that gets into good positions. We know that he's had a bit of kind of unfortunate times when he's just missed tap-ins and stuff like that. But he is going to score goals. But I'm looking at it now and I just like, is he nailed? Like he started the last game and he started against Man City, to be fair. Man City's kind of perfect game for him, really. But before that, kind of nothing apart from the first game of the season. So is he now, has something changed where he's now nailed on? I just don't think so. And again, he's going to take up a forward spot. Like, Mount can play wide. Havertz can play in the wide position. I mean, Pulisic's injured, to be fair. Hudson-Odoi, I don't know, seems to tend to get used at right wing-back if at all. Ziyech is there as well. So maybe they haven't got a huge amount of competition. But is Havertz going to suddenly just stop playing? I mean, it wasn't long ago that he was starting as well. So I just think for 8.6 million, again, there's only 3 forward spots. And like, there's more forwards that I want. Like Hwang could be an option, Tony as well, maybe Armstrong. I'm not saying they're better options than Werner, but they are cheaper. And you are more convinced they're going to start. And I don't know if you can say that with him. And again, maybe I've got that wrong. So I do welcome Chelsea fans' opinions, but I just don't see why you'd be rushing out to put him in. I mean, to be fair, having double Chelsea attack for these 3 fixtures, so I can just make them a bit bigger, right? So Norwich at home, Burnley at home. I mean, these are, and Newcastle away, they're kind of like 3 of the top 5 fixtures you could ask for. If Newcastle was at home, it'd be a little bit better. So I see why, but is he going to start all 3 of those games? I just don't know. And if I don't know, that kind of puts me off really wanting to go out and maybe change my kind of structure of my team or anything like that. Obviously, if Lukaku was out, then that might be a little bit different, but I find that hard to believe that he's going to miss out. So, no, I don't have a problem with going with Lukaku and Werner for Game Week 9. It's a great fixture. If you're going to take a punt, then punts against teams like Norwich at home is where to do it. But is there suddenly a confidence that he's going to start? And I think the fact that I've said that now about 50 times means that I've put doubts in my mind. I just wouldn't want to go for him. So I'm going to say no for now. But Chelsea fans, you might be better informed than me. There we go. I feel like maybe I could have just said, yeah, injury updates, we'll find out in the press conferences, and nobody's nailed, basically, was the theme of this video. But yeah, that was just my thought process. Like, Man City attack, I just think is an absolute nightmare. And the thing is, I'd love to get one in. I'd love to get Foden in, but I just know as soon as he's benched, that's going to frustrate me, even though I've got a decent bench myself. So I'm probably going to steer clear and hope that Saka at Arsenal can outscore them, just because I think he'll start every single game. But we'll see how it goes. Let me know what Chelsea defender you're going for. Let me know if you're going straight back for Trent. Give it a like if you've enjoyed it, and hit that subscribe button if you're new around here. Don't forget to check out Fantasy Football Scout if you haven't already. There is a link in the description below. You can sign up for as a member and start using all the great tools that they've got over there. There are a lot of tools to go through. Like, stats tables are great, but there's loads of other stuff over there too. So make sure to check that out. Link in the description below. I'll leave that there. I'll be back tomorrow with a team selection video. Please do give this one a like if you enjoyed it. Hit that subscribe button if you're new around here, and I'll see you next time.